Three. And good afternoon, producer Susan. How was your Memorial Day weekend?
You couldn't have asked for better weather. It was in the 70s, low humidity, light breeze. It was perfect weather.
And I know we talked about this last year, but every year you go to a special place and you went again this year, right? What was that special place?
Yeah, so Boalsburg, Pennsylvania is one of the places that claims to be the founding town of Memorial Day. And it started with the decoration, well, which started as Decoration Day, the decorating of the graves
Huh?
of soldiers.
And that's in central Pennsylvania, not too far from Penn State University, right?
Yeah, about 5 miles. Yep,
Okay.
Boalsburg, Pennsylvania, the birthplace of Memorial
Of the
Day.
Memorial Day Remembrance Celebration. Well, that's great. All right. Well, for those who, if you're ever out in that area, make sure to drive through Boalsburg. If you're on your way, if you're taking your kids out to maybe do a preview of Penn State, stay out in State College, see if you can take a detour through Boalsburg.
Yep.
Anyway, so I'm glad you're all rested up. Boy, do we have a lot of stuff to talk about. You would think being a holiday weekend, not a lot of stuff happened. Uh, but today's May 27th. It's Tuesday, the day after Memorial Day. And man, we have a clip heavy show today. I'm not going to be doing a lot of talking. I've got a bunch of clips. And by the way, you won't, it'd be too late. I will be on talking about a lot of this stuff on Denver radio station 560 AM KLZ tonight at 5 o'clock Mountain Time. But if you listen to this on Wednesday and you want to hear me, I'll be back on that same radio station Thursday night at 5:05 Mountain, 7:05 Eastern, and that's radio station KLZ 560 AM. You can listen on your computer. Just Google KLZ 560, and there'll be a link where you can listen live on your computer. So I'll be on that show tonight,
And you're a regular every Thursday now, right?
every Thursday night
Yeah.
at 5:05 Mountain, 7:05 Eastern.
And for those of you who have Alexas in your home, I personally, when I'm cooking dinner, I just ask Alexa to play my KLZ, and
Yep,
she puts you on Thursday nights while I'm cooking dinner.
right. You can. Yeah, Alexa, yeah, loves to play radio stations. All right. We didn't do a quote of the week last week, but we have another one from our old friend Thomas Sowell on the reaction of people who have been receiving and then lose preferential treatment. Stupidest thing I've heard all week. We'll play a clip of striking Starbucks employees who claim that Starbucks is threatening to take away all of their civil rights, which I found hilarious. And the most outrageous thing I've heard all week will tell you how many taxpayer dollars the Biden administration Department of Energy pushed out the door in the 76-day period between the day Kamala Harris lost the presidential election and the day that Donald Trump was sworn in. It's a staggering amount of money that they rushed out the door in that 76-day period. And we'll tell you how much it was and how what made it so incredibly um, outrageous. In a scary story, no, everybody's coming up with these new AI, artificial intelligence models, right?
Yep.
Google's got one, Elon Musk has one, Microsoft has one. Last year we talked about Chat GPT. Well, we'll tell you about an experiment they did with an AI model and to the scary lengths this AI model went to in order to try and preserve its existence after it was led to believe that it might be shut down and erased. It's scary what this AI model started to do. We have a clip of Secretary of State Marco Rubio defending the decision by the State Department to revoke some student visas and deport some certain individuals. We all know who Charlie Kirk is, right? Turning Point USA.
Yep. Yep.
We played a clip of him a couple of weeks ago at some, debate where he demolished this young student. Well, he was at Cambridge University in the United Kingdom, and he got into a debate with a Cambridge student who was saying, all of this death and destruction is Israel's fault, and he demolishes that young student. And we'll tell you about this. We were going to talk about this last week. We never got to it. It's a scheme that virtually all the states have been participating in to get the federal government to reimburse them for more than 100% of their true out-of-pocket Medicaid expenses. And as usual, we're going to end up with our taxpayer relief shot. This week comes to us from Bellevue, Nebraska, where a teenage thug armed with a gun decides to return to a home he had successfully robbed a few days earlier for a second try. What do you think happens the second time?
Yeah, I'm gonna say that they weren't very successful.
Yeah, well, if you get robbed once, you think you take steps so that if it happens again.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the homeowner took steps. and he ran anyway. All right, so that's still a lot to try to cram in, but here we go. All right, our old friend economist Thomas Sowell, and he said when people get used to preferential treatment and then they are given equal treatment, that seems to them like discrimination. Can you? I can think of that when you start to take away special preferences. You remember all that? Like,
Becomes your standard, right?
yeah,
You get preferential treatment all the time, and that becomes you get used to it, and it becomes your standard.
yeah, whether it be on housing or jobs, job applications, or you remember Harvard
Hmm.
when the Supreme Court come down and said, no, you can't pass over more qualified students to
Hmm.
give, less qualified students admission preference. So again, when people get used to preferential treatment, equal treatment suddenly seems like discrimination. And we've seen that over and over when people, how like a stuck pig when they lose their special treatment. So, um, anything you want to add to that?
No, yeah, it becomes the standard.
All right. All right. How many businesses do you go into, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, et cetera, where there's some sort of dress code?
By the employees or by the patrons?
No, the employees
Pretty much everywhere.
everywhere. Well, did you hear about the big ruckus where Starbucks imposes very mild dress code? Did you hear about that one?
No, but Starbucks has a dress code.
Well, they do now, but they
No,
simply said,
I think
hey,
they've
you have
always
to.
had a dress code, at least of an apron.
Well, it was an apron, but now they said, yeah, and you have to wear a solid colored dark shirt under your apron. Well, now you know that a few of the Starbucks locations have been unionized, right?
Yep, I have heard that.
Right, not most, but a few. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
so Starbucks imposes this dress code, and a few of these unionized employees go on strike. And here is how they're reacting and how they're referring to this simple, hey, you've got to wear a dark colored solid shirt under your apron. And this person has no clue about the Constitution. Here we go. And he's there. This is a news reporter talking to one of the interviewing one of the strikers.
We just demand that Starbucks follow the law. They don't have the right to overthrow the National Labor Relations Act. Um, they're imperiling every civil right that we have, not just
Imperiling every civil right that we have. Did you catch that? I'm going to back that up
Yeah.
again. Here we go.
they're imperiling every civil right that we have, not just not just as workers, as union workers, but that's the framework that all of our rights are under. So all of our rights are in danger, and the only thing we can rely on is each other and taking direct action, solidarity.
Yeah, perfect. Colin?
Exactly what Jacob said.
Perfect.
It's up to us to stand up for our rights.
Love it. Thank you guys.
What do you think?
I didn't realize that what I wear to work was covered under the Constitution.
The National Labor Relations Act. By the way, if they think, since they're part of a union, if they thought that was violating their union agreement, all they have to do is file a grievance with their employer, and there is a
Yeah.
process,
Yep.
within their union contract that says if you have a grievance, you file a grievance, and
Yeah.
here's how your grievance will be adjudicated, typically through mediation.
And
But no,
really, is like what shirt you wear underneath your apron really your biggest like problem?
yeah. And is it taking away all of your civil rights, each and every one of your civil
I
rights?
feel like you probably have some other issues you could probably fight for.
Well, anyway, so that's the stupidest thing I heard a week. Have you heard of anything
Yeah.
stupid
No,
last week?
that's pretty good. Yeah.
All right. All right. All right. Let's see what's next if we can fit this in. All right. So obviously Kamala Harris lost the presidential election on November 5th, and Donald Trump was sworn in on January 21st. Now
Mhm.
that was 76 days. Now, what else was in that 76-day period? We had the 4-day Thanksgiving holiday, right?
Yep.
We had the Christmas holiday.
Yep.
We had the New Year's Eve holiday, and I think we
Yep.
had 11 weekends, some of which were combined
And
with those.
well, I think that was actually also wasn't the MLK Day too.
MLK Day was there.
Yep.
So out of those 76 days, if you take out 11 weekends, that's 22. So 76 minus 22 would be 54. And then you had Thanksgiving Day, you had the Friday after Thanksgiving, you had Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Day.
Mhm.
Anyway, so out of those 76 calendar days, there were only like 47 working days. Well, here's what the Biden administration did, their Department of Energy did in those 47 working days. And this is Energy Secretary Chris Wright. He's at a Senate hearing and he's being questioned by who's our favorite senator from Louisiana?
Oh, it's Kennedy.
He's being so this is Senator Energy Secretary Chris Wright giving some testimony to our favorite senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. Here we go.
Has been run and how American taxpayer money has been handled.
Chairman, I look forward to, we got a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Secretary, I want to go back to some of your earlier testimony, be sure I heard it correctly. The 76-day period you're talking about, that's the period between the time that President Trump was elected and President Biden left office. Is that right?
That is correct.
And during that short period of time, 76 days, how much taxpayer money went out the door of the Department of Energy?
From the Loan Program Office in loans and commitments, $93 billion. Well over twice as much as in the previous 15 years. So
now think about that. They approved and issued more 93 billion of loans, which was more than they issued in the prior 15 years combined. Isn't that staggering?
They were awfully busy in those 40-something days.
Yeah. Here we go.
How do you vet and do due diligence on a loan in 76 days? One loan, much less $93 billion. How do you do it?
I think it's probably pretty clear it wasn't done in many cases. As I mentioned, I'm told I'm holding back clearly in place stuff. There is lots of funds that have gone out the door and commitments that were made from businesses that provided no business plan, no numbers about their own financial solvency or how this project.
So you're telling me that the Department of Energy, in the 76-day period before their boss was going to leave office, gave or loaned money to entities that had no business plan?
Correct.
No financials?
Correct. A number of those were were before the 76-day period as well. I've come in with great concern about how this institution, this great American institution, has been run and how American taxpayer money has been handled. I'm sorry everyone's upset that we're taking some time to do it, but what we've seen.
Now, I'm going to have to cut it there. It's a 10-minute long clip. So that was only the first 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but isn't that staggering? They got $93 billion in government grants to businesses that held no business plans, no financial statements, and it was more money than they granted in the previous 15 years. That was staggering. I mean, talk about
and basically admits that they didn't do their due diligence.
Yeah, they didn't. You can't do due diligence on that many loans in that few working days. All right. So let's talk about, have you been following the development of all these AI models, Grok?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's fascinating and some of it's downright scary.
Well, here's one that's scary. So there was a new model, and as a test, you can feed an AI model, you can determine what it's going to have access to. You can limit, you can not let it, roam the internet if you don't want to, and you can only, you have it. So in other words, it's air gapped from the internet. So you don't have a Wi-Fi connection, but you can feed it stuff. You can give it access to whatever data you want. So they let it have access to some what supposedly were interoffice memos saying, well, we're thinking about maybe shutting this down and going to a different version. And they also let it read some other fake interoffice letters about, so-and-so is having an affair and this and that. So here's what the AI model did when it learned that it might be shutting down and discontinued. Um, and again, as a test, the models were allowed to scan documents that included fake proposals to shut it down and fake information about one of its developers having an extramarital affair. So, in an effort to preserve its own existence, the model threatened to make the developers' alleged affair public, and also, and this is a quote from the developers, we found instances of the model attempting to write self-propagating malicious worms. These are like worms. It's a malware, fabricating legal documentation and leaving hidden notes to future instances of itself, all in an effort to undermine its developers and intentions. How scary is that? This thing was scheming to preserve itself, including coming up with fake legal documentation and leaving hidden notes so that if a future version of itself was ever put back online, the future version would be able to read these notes from the prior version. How scary.
I mean, isn't this like what these AI movies are made out of? Is that
exactly.
AI does this to itself? That's like the baseline storyline.
The
for
baseline,
every
yes.
AI movie that's ever been made.
It becomes sentient, which means, it becomes aware of its own existence and then does whatever it has to do to preserve. I mean, there's probably even, half a dozen, horror films at least about remember the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey? I can't.
Yeah.
The famous when he was talking to Hal, the computer, and by the way, Hal was a takeoff an IBM because Hal is one letter different than IBM. And remember when Dave says, Dave says, Hal, open the bay doors, and Hal says, I can't do that, Dave. Remember that? I don't know if you ever saw the movie, but that's 2001: A Space Odyssey. I think that was the first where the computer became self-aware and began to decide that, nope, I'm not going to do that because it's not in my best interest. All right. Let's move on to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who I love. But the more I see of him, the more I like him. He was at a congressional hearing, and he had just gotten done going through a 7-minute cross-examination by Maryland Senator Chris Von Hollen, not Holland, but Von Hollen, about the revocation of student visas and whatnot. So now it's Secretary of State Rubio's turn to give his rebuttal, and he has the floor. And I love this. And you're going to hear Senator Van Hollen keep trying to crash back in, even though his time has expired. So here's former Senator Marco Rubio, now our Secretary of State, defending his department's use of why they're revoking not all, but some student visas.
And personally, did I regret voting for you for Secretary of State? I yield back.
May I respond?
You may sit.
Well, first of all, your regret for voting for me confirms I'm doing a good job based on what I know.
Well, that's just a flippant statement, Mr. Secretary.
Can I respond, Mr. Chairman?
You may. I didn't ask.
Senator, please let the Secretary.
I'd be happy to, but then I can respond to his.
Your time's up, Senator, and willfully used, I might add.
Well,
your remarks do not represent the view of this committee.
Well, Mr.
Secretary, please.
Well, I can't respond to everything he said because much of these are untrue, but I'll go through a few. First of all, I'm actually very proud of the work we've done with USAID. For example, I don't regret cutting $10 million for male circumcision.
No, he's referencing the U.S. Remember we talked about the U.S. Agency for African Development. So he's talking. So this isn't not just about student visas. So I'm going to back it up because he starts off talking about what they did with the U.S. Agency for African Development.
Secretary, please.
Well, I can't respond to everything he said because much of these are untrue, but I'll go through a few. First of all, I'm actually very proud of the work we've done with USAID. For example, I don't regret cutting $10 million for male circumcisions in Mozambique. I don't know how that makes us stronger and more prosperous as a nation. I don't regret psychosocial support services.
I raised Sudan, Mr. Secretary.
Can I respond,
Senator, I'd ask you to suspend. You had 7 straight minutes.
I chose to use my time that way, Mr. Chairman. That's my right to.
Please suspend, Secretary Rubio.
Well, I can go on. I mean, there's other things here. We spent $227,000 for Big Cat's YouTube channel from USAID. We spent $14 million for social cohesion in Mali, whatever the hell that means. So I can go on and on. I got the list here, and there's more. I didn't even bring the whole list. In the case of El Salvador, absolutely. Absolutely. We deported gang members. gang members, including the one you had a margarita with. And that guy is a human trafficker, and that guy is a gangbanger, and the evidence is going to be clear. In the days to come, you're going to see who you went to defend.
I'm sorry, Secretary Rubio has the floor.
Mr. Chairman, he can't make unsubstantiated
Senator,
comments like that.
Secretary Rubio has the floor. You had
Secretary
your time.
Rubio should take that testimony to the federal court of the
Senator,
United States because
well,
he hasn't done it under oath.
Here's another point, okay? There is a division in our government between the federal branch and the judicial branch. No judge in the judicial branch cannot tell me or the president how to conduct foreign policy. No judge can tell me how I have to outreach to a foreign partner or what I need to say to them. And if I do reach to that foreign partner and talk to them, I have under no obligation to share that with the judiciary branch. Just like a judge cannot order me to negotiate with a foreign minister of Russia, they cannot order me to negotiate with a foreign minister or the president of El Salvador. And if I did negotiate with them, which we have responded to them, and we've told them we've had communications with the president of El Salvador, I am under no obligation under our division of powers in this country and to share with the judicial branch how I conducted diplomacy of the United States. It would actually be counterproductive. If I started sharing with courts or frankly with the media, my conversations with foreign leaders and all of their details, no foreign leader would talk to me again and we would break trust with them. So I have complied with every court order. What I won't comply with is an order to disclose what I'm saying and what we're talking about with a foreign leader, because then they won't talk to me. Diplomacy doesn't work that way. About the student visas, let me say this. I don't deport anybody, and I don't snatch anybody. The State Department does not have officers in the street snatching everybody. What I do is revoke visas, and it's very simple. A visa is not a right. It is a privilege. People apply for student visas to come into the United States and study. And if you tell me that you're coming to the United States to lead campus crusades, to take over libraries and try to burn down buildings and acts of violence, we're not going to give you a visa.
Is that what Ms. Ostork did?
We're not going to give you a visa.
Is that what she did?
Come on,
Mr. Secretary.
And every single one of these cases, the factors are different.
Senator,
the bottom line is if you're coming here to stir up trouble on our campuses, we will deny you a visa. And if you
Does
have
the
a
First
visa
Amendment
and we
apply
find
to
you, we'll
people
revoke
living in
it.
the United States?
And we're going to do more. There are more coming. We're going to continue to revoke the visas of people who are here as guests and are disrupting our higher education facilities. People are paying money. These kids pay money to go to school, and they have to walk
Writing
through a
an
bunch of
op-ed
lunatics
to the
who are
top
here on
papers
student visas.
disrupting the
Simple
foreign
as
policy of the United
States. I want to
States.
do more. I hope we can
That's
find more of these people.
pathetic, Mr.
In fact,
Secretary.
the other day, some guys led a riot. I forgot what university it was, and I asked, please, can you find the arrest records of all the people that were arrested at that riot at that campus? Because if any of them have a visa, we're going to revoke
I
it.
feel so much safer.
All right, let's-
Lock up.
And by the way, he said, well, she wrote an op-ed. Is that why she? No, she got her visa revoked because she blocked entrance to a library and took over a building. It had nothing to do with her writing an op-ed in the New York Times. Neat the way he glosses over the fact and says you deported her, you revoked her visa because she wrote an opinion piece. No, he revoked her visa because she participated in a protest that blocked people from getting into a library and then took over another building. But so what do you think of Senator Rubio, or Secretary of State Rubio?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's amazing that those two gentlemen, the disrespect they have for each other, they're grown men who are supposed to be leaders of our country, and how they disrespect each other. But yeah, visas are a privilege. Nobody owes you when we travel to a foreign country, that country doesn't owe us a visa. It's a privilege.
That's right. All right, so that was Senator. He was a senator, but that was Marco Rubio. Anyway, so let's move on to our Charlie Kirk, Turning Point USA. Again, he's at Oxford, Cambridge University. And by the way, the young man he's talking to, I don't know if he's got ADD, but the guy's literally, he's standing up at a table with a microphone. And if you can watch the video, he's literally jumping up and down on one foot. He's literally hopping as he's talking. I know. What was it? Adderall some people take or whatever?
Some people with ADHD take Adderall, yes.
Okay, but anyway, so he gets challenged on Israel's conduct in the war against Hamas. Here we go.
In the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also that there is no justification.
Are they equally?
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children.
But let's
the futile. Let's start here. There is no justification, Mr. Kirk, for invading hospitals, for bombing innocent populations, and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel and the West security.
You've made that point, but
well, it's not a point; it's a moral truth, isn't it?
Okay, yeah. It was also a moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish. I let you talk. Israel, at its holiest day of the calendar year, besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War, on Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200 plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they are operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded. There is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Not the morality of a child.
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy and Hamas is bad has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University. Let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
Well, and then it goes over. And by the way, but he does point out that unlike, a war with, say, Germany or Japan, where they have battleships and forts and, air and air bases, right? Hamas had their tunnels, under hospitals, under schools, there were no defined freestanding military targets to go after. I mean, it's been established time and time again that Hamas, interwove themselves with the civilian population and used civilian buildings, for the base of operations. So
it's like using a hostage as a shield. They're essentially
using a hostage as a
places
shield.
as a shield, thinking that we have a good soul and we're not going to bomb a church or a hospital. So that's where they're going to choose to hide to protect themselves.
Well, and Israel said, no, we're not going to play that game. If you want to hide under a hospital, then we're going to come after you wherever you hide. And if the hospital gets bombed, it's your fault because that's where you chose to make.
And it is unfortunate casualty of war. It is very sad that they played that horrible game.
Yep, it is. But I thought Charlie Kirk did an excellent job. All right. How much time we got left?
You have about 7 minutes.
Okay, I'll do this real quick, and then we're going to move on to our taxpayer relief chat. All right. Now, this big thing about the Medicaid cuts, right? So in the current budget bill, there is a quote 800. You hear this number, cut 880 billion from Medicaid. Well, what they don't tell you is that 880 billion, that's a 10-year total, which is only a relatively tiny 88 billion a year, which is only roughly 10% of the total annual Medicaid expense. So it's not this huge. They're not gutting Medicaid. They're trimming 10%. And let me tell you how the states, and by the way, the federal government, the states do fund part of their own Medicaid programs. States administer. The states get to decide who gets onto, who can be eligible and not eligible with their programs. And by the way, more than half the states right now have decided, you've heard about Medicaid expansion, which they were allowed to do under Obamacare. More than half the states now, if you're a couple with no kids and you have a household income in excess of $69,500 a year, even if your employer says, hey, we've got a employer-sponsored subsidized health insurance plan that you can participate in, more than half the states said, hey, if you'd rather be on our state Medicaid program, which is no payroll deduction, no copays when you go to the doctor, and no deductibles if you need hospital care, would you go on your employer's subsidized program or would you go on your state's Medicaid program?
I'd go on the state.
Right, because it's free.
Yeah.
And $69,500 a year doesn't really make you poor, does it?
No.
No. But more than half the states have already said, hey, if you're a couple who got no kids, 69,000, yeah, you're eligible. Come on, jump. Anyway, so that's why Medicaid has gotten, way out of hand. In some states, I think Colorado, by the way, almost 1/3 of the population of the state of Colorado is currently on Medicaid. Anyway, but here's another scheme. that the states are doing. Um, States have imposed on nursing homes and hospitals what they call a provider, even though they're tax exempt or nonprofit. They still say, well, you have to pay a provider fee to us because you're in the business of providing health care. So these nursing homes and hospitals have to kick back, if you will, a fee to the state for the privilege of operating. But the state says, but don't worry, we'll make it up to you on our reimbursement rates. And how they do that, they agree to reimburse these healthcare providers at a rate that's 2.5 times as high as they would for Medicare. So let's say you get a bad cut on your hand and you're a Medicare patient. Now you're over 65 and you go in the hospital. Let's say the hospital, maybe Medicare pays the hospital $300 to put a couple of stitches in your hand. If you go into that same hospital, same doctor with the same cut, but you're in the state Medicaid program, instead of the state paying them the $300 Medicare rate, they'll pay them 2.5 times that, which is $750. Yeah. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, that's why when you go to the hospital, Tylenol costs like some absurd amount, like $100 a pill when you can buy
but not under Medicare, by the way. But under Medicaid, they agree to pay those out.
I meant just in general, regardless of, Medicare, Medicaid, any kind of insurance, hospitals are known to charge ridiculous prices for everything.
Right. But here's how the scam works. And even Biden called it money laundering. Mm-hmm. So these states are collecting tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in provider fees. But they don't credit those provider fees against their Medicaid department. They take them into their general revenue. And then they show what they're paying out. They're paying out these absurd inflated rates, for care. And then they turn around to the federal government and say, hey, well, you have to give us back you have to reimburse us for 90% of these ridiculous inflated costs we've incurred. Well, but guess what? They're actually making money when you net out what they're getting from the providers, minus the 90% that the federal government is reimbursing. If they spend $1 on Medicaid, they're making $1. They're literally making money on Medicaid. So when the federal government says, hey, we're going to cut how much we're giving you by 10%, trust me, they're still going to be making money on Medicaid. Yep. So that's what's called the Medicaid tax scam. So the states are just going to have to tighten their belt and deal with it. And states, by the way, if they want to keep people making $69,500 on their plan, they're free to do that. But the residents of that state are going to have to pay for it. Now, whether they raise the sales tax by 1/10% or they bump their state income tax by 1/10%, if your state government, your governor and your state legislature want to keep allowing people who have access to employer-sponsored plans and they're making more than $69,000 a year to stay on their Medicaid plan, you need to be prepared to belly up and pay for it. Anyway, how much time we got now?
Oh, we only have about 4 minutes left.
All right, we're going to jump right into our taxpayer relief shot, which it goes like this.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
All right, Joe, you save. So when the bad guy gets killed, it saves the taxpayers the cost of a trial. So here we go to Ohio.
Police are investigating a deadly home invasion. Officers say a man shot a suspected intruder after he broke in and started waving a gun last night. 21-year-old Tyrell Dahlia was pronounced dead inside that apartment. This mugshot is from January after police say Dahlia resisted arrest and officers tased him. Action 3 News reporter Rebecca Ray has more on what happened last night and Dahlia's history with law enforcement.
Around 9 last night, Bellevue police responded to an apartment near 19th and Main for a shooting involving injuries. When they arrived, a 21-year-old man was dead. According to police, Saturday night, Tyrell Dahlia was armed with a handgun when he broke into this Bellevue apartment.
My friends
felon with a gun, by the way,
defended themselves after trying to push him out forcefully when he didn't and started waving the gun around.
That's when the tenant used his own gun to shoot Dahlia, according to a close friend of the tenant, Sean Sammons. Dahlia died at the scene as a result of his gunshot wounds. Sammons says Dahlia was no stranger.
Same gentleman came by the night before, made off with $50 on the TV.
The guy had been there the night before, stole $50 on the TV, and he came back.
And says since that invasion, his friend was prepared with a shotgun nearby.
Someone breaks in, it's there for your own protection.
Tyrell Dahlia was no stranger to authorities either. In January 2014, he was arrested for threatening an ex-girlfriend. Court records show Dahlia was out on bail while waiting for trial for the January assault and threats. Rebecca Ray, KMTV, Action 3 News.
So dead right there. So what do you think?
I didn't realize that felons could get guns.
Oh, sure. You just go right down to the gun store and you fill out the ATF background check form and they sell you a gun, right? That's how that works. Yeah. All right. Anything you want to add before we sign off?
Nope.
All right. Anyway, thanks for listening, folks. I hope you found what I posted enjoyable. If you want to look at some of these story links, give producer Susan a day or two to get them put up. If you want me to send you anything directly, just send me an email to joe@jerzeejoe.com. Just remember to spell Jerzee, Jerzee. And if you want to see some of the material, just go to the Jerzee Joe website at jerzeejoe.com. Just remember to spell Jersey with an R, a Z, and two E's. And with that, producer Susan,
I'll be sure to listen to you tonight on KLZ Radio and
KLZ 560
and every Thursday.
All right. All right. Let me know what you think. Talk to you next week. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.